The stars above the planet Serenity Prime had always been peaceful. For 300 years, the Zephyrian people lived without fear. Their tall, thin bodies moved with grace through crystal cities that sparkled in the sunlight. Their large eyes saw only beauty in the universe. War was something they had forgotten long ago. High Arbiter Velith stood in the Grand Council chamber, looking at the holographic display before him. The image showed something that made his heart race with terror. Dark ships, shaped like giant insects, moved through space toward their outer colonies. These were not traders or explorers. These were destroyers. "The third colony has gone silent," reported Counselor Thurin, his voice shaking. "Just like the others. First Harmony Station, then New Garden, now Crystal Falls. All of them, gone." Velith's hands trembled as he touched the control panel. The display changed to show the last transmission from Crystal Falls. Thousands of Zephyrians ran through the streets in panic. Behind them, massive creatures with hard shells and sharp claws chased them down. The creatures ate everything they caught. Buildings crumbled as the monsters devoured the very stone and metal. "How long before they reach our core worlds?" Velith asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3, Thurin replied. "Our defensive shields cannot stop them. Our evacuation ships are too slow. We have no weapons that can hurt them." The truth hit Velith like a cold wind. His people had built a civilization based on healing and growing things. They had machines that could make dead planets bloom with life. They could cure any disease and build cities that floated in the clouds. But they had no idea how to fight. The council chamber filled with worried voices. Some suggested hiding deeper in space. Others wanted to try talking to the creatures. A few spoke of surrender, hoping the monsters might show mercy. "There is one option we have not considered," said Elder Morvith, the oldest member of their council. Her voice was weak but clear. "We could ask for help." "From whom?" Velith asked. "The Antaran Federation will not get involved in violence. The Crystal Alliance follows the same peaceful ways we do. Who in the galaxy still knows how to fight?" Morvath's ancient eyes looked sad. "The Deathworlders." A shocked silence filled the room. The word hung in the air like poison. Deathworlders were the species that came from dangerous planets. They were the ones who still carried weapons and trained soldiers. Most civilized races looked down on them as primitive and violent. "You mean humans?" Thurin asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Morvith said. "They are the only ones who might help us. They are the only ones who remember how to kill." Light years away, Captain Jake Morrison sat on the bridge of the human exploration ship Endeavor. His crew was busy mapping a new star system when the communication officer looked up with surprise. "Captain, we're getting a transmission. It's on all frequencies, broadcast to the entire galaxy." "Put it on screen," Jake said. The main display showed High Arbiter Velith standing in what looked like a beautiful crystal palace. But the alien's face showed pure terror. When he spoke, his words were translated by the ship's computer. "People of the galaxy, this is High Arbiter Velith of the Zephyrian Empire. We face total destruction. An enemy we cannot fight is destroying our worlds. Our people are dying. Our children are being eaten alive. We beg anyone who can help us to please respond. We offer all our technology, all our knowledge, anything you want. Please, someone help us." The transmission ended. Jake's bridge crew looked at each other in shock. They had all heard of the Zephyrians. They were known as one of the most advanced and peaceful races in the galaxy. If something was scaring them this badly, it had to be serious. "Sir," said Lieutenant Amy Brooks, the communications officer, "I'm monitoring galactic channels. Most species are ignoring the message." The Antaron sent a reply saying they cannot get involved in violent conflicts. The Crystal Alliance offered to send medical supplies, but no military aid. Jake rubbed his chin, thinking, what do we know about this enemy they mentioned? Scanning. The databases now, said Science Officer Dan Kelly. Found something. The Korth swarm. Reports go back about 50 years, but they were always on the edge of known space. Insectoid species, highly aggressive. They consume entire planets, leaving nothing behind. Consume how? Literally eat them, sir. The planet, the people, the buildings, everything. They turn matter into energy to fuel their reproduction. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. He had seen many dangerous things in space, but this sounded like something from a nightmare. Sir, Amy said, I'm getting reports from other human ships. Most of Earth Command is ignoring the Zephyrian message. They say it's not our problem. Jake thought about his sister's children back on Earth. He imagined giant monsters chasing them through the streets, eating everything in sight. The image made him angry. Send a message to Admiral Lisa Carter at Earth Defense Command, he ordered. Tell her Captain Morrison recommends immediate military aid to the Zephyrian Empire. Sir, the Zephyrians have never been friendly to humans. They've always called us violent primitives. Maybe, Jake said. But right now, violent primitives might be exactly what they need. At Earth Defense Command, Admiral Lisa Carter read Jake's report 3 times. The images from the Zephyrian transmission played on repeat on her office screen. She had spent 20 years protecting humanity from threats in space. She knew real danger when she saw it. Her aide, Colonel Ryan Tucker, stood beside her desk. Admiral, the Joint Chiefs think we should stay out of this. The Zephyrians never helped us when we needed it. Why should we help them? Lisa looked at the screen again. A Zephyrian child, no older than 6, ran crying through crystal streets while monsters chased behind. The image reminded her of her own daughter at that age. Colonel, how long would it take to get our nearest battle group to Zephyrian space? The Third Fleet is about 2 weeks out, ma'am. But Admiral, if we commit to this fight, we're looking at a real war. These Korth creatures sound like they won't stop until everything is dead. Lisa stood up and walked to the window. Earth hung beautiful and blue in the darkness of space. She thought about all the wars humans had fought just to survive on their violent homeworld. They had learned hard lessons about what it took to protect the innocent. The galaxy thinks we're savage because we carry guns, she said quietly. Maybe it's time to show them why we carry guns. She turned back to Ryan. Send orders to Admiral Rodriguez. The Third Fleet moves to Zephyrian space immediately. Full battle loadout. Yes, ma'am. What should I tell the Joint Chiefs? Lisa smiled grimly. Tell them the Deathworlders are going to war. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace near Serenity Prime like thunder in a clear sky. 12 massive warships appeared where empty space had been moments before. The lead ship, the battlecruiser Valkyrie, was twice as large as anything the Zephyrians had ever built. Commander Alex Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Valkyrie, looking at the beautiful crystal world below. The planet sparkled like a jewel, with floating cities connected by bridges of light. It was the most peaceful sight he had ever seen. It was also about to become a battlefield. Sir, said Lieutenant Ben Carter, the communications officer, we're getting a message from the planet. They want to know if we're here to help. Tell them the cavalry has arrived, Alex said. Request permission to land a diplomatic team. High Arbiter, Velith, waited in the main council chamber as the human shuttle descended through Serenity Prime's atmosphere. He had never seen a human before, but he had heard the stories. They came from a world where everything tried to kill them. They were short and thick compared to Zephyrians. Built like living weapons, the shuttle landed in the Crystal Plaza outside the council building. Velith watched through the window as the door opened. The first human to step out was a woman in military uniform. She moved with quick, precise steps, her eyes constantly scanning for threats. Behind her came 6 more humans, all carrying weapons. Marine Colonel Kate Sullivan looked around the Crystal Plaza with professional interest. Beautiful, she thought, but no cover if someone started shooting. Her tactical mind automatically identified escape routes and defensive positions. It was a habit that had kept her alive through 15 years of combat. Dr. Nathan Price stepped up beside her, carrying a translation device and looking nervous. As the fleet's xenobiologist, he was supposed to help with first contact, but he had never dealt with a species that had never seen violence. The Zephyrians waiting for them were tall and graceful, with skin that seemed to glow in the sunlight. Their large eyes showed fear, but also hope. They moved slowly, carefully, like people afraid of breaking something precious. "Greetings," said High Arbiter Velith, through the translator. "I am Velith, leader of the Zephyrian people. We are grateful beyond words that you came to help us." Kate stepped forward and saluted crisply. "Colonel Kate Sullivan, 3rd Fleet Marines. We're here to assess the threat and plan your defense." Velith looked confused by the salute. His people had no military traditions. "Please, come inside. We have prepared a meal and comfortable rooms for you." As they walked through the crystal halls, Kate noticed something that worried her. There were no guards anywhere, no security cameras, no locked doors, no weapons of any kind. These people had built a civilization without any defenses at all. The council chamber was filled with Zephyrian leaders, all looking hopeful and frightened at the same time. Dr. Price set up his equipment while Kate studied the room. Still no security, no way to control access. An enemy could walk right in and kill everyone. "We must show you what we face," Velith said. The room's central display activated, showing images from the destroyed colonies. Kate watched the footage with growing alarm. The Korth creatures were unlike anything she had seen before. They moved like a plague of giant insects, eating everything in their path. Buildings, vehicles, people, nothing was safe. "How many of these things are there?" she asked. "Our scouts estimate several million in the main swarm," replied Counselor Thurin. "They reproduce by consuming matter and converting it to energy." "What defenses do you have?" "We have energy shields around our cities. Our ships can move very fast. We have medical facilities that can heal any injury." Kate frowned. "I mean weapons. What do you use to fight back?" The Zephyrians looked at each other in confusion. "We do not fight," Velith said slowly. "We have never needed to. We thought perhaps your weapons could stop them while our people escape." "Escape to where?" Kate asked. "These things eat planets. Running away just gives them more time to grow stronger." Dr. Price cleared his throat. "Colonel, I don't think they understand what we're talking about. Their species evolved as herbivores on a world with no large predators. The concept of violence is literally foreign to them." Kate stared at him. "You're telling me they don't know how to fight at all? Not just that they choose not to fight. They physically and mentally cannot process the idea of hurting another living thing." Before Kate could respond, alarms began ringing throughout the building. A Zephyrian technician ran into the room, his face pale with terror. Korth scouts. 3 ships approaching the outer system. Through the chamber's crystal walls, Kate could see Zephyrian civilians running in panic, but they weren't running toward shelters or weapons. They were just running, with no plan and no destination. "Where are your military forces?" Kate demanded. "We have no military," Velith said helplessly. "We have city maintenance crews and transport pilots, but no soldiers." Kate grabbed her radio. "Colonel Sullivan to Valkyrie. We have incoming hostiles. 3 Korth ships, approaching fast." Commander Rodriguez's voice crackled back. "Understood, Colonel. We're moving to intercept." Kate turned to her Marines. "Sergeant Chris Davis, take your squad and get these civilians to safety. Find the strongest building you can." "Yes, ma'am," Chris replied. "What about weapons for the locals?" Kate looked at the terrified Zephyrians. They wouldn't know how to use them. Just focus on keeping them alive. The Korth ships appeared in the planet's sky like falling stars. They were organic-looking things, all curves and spikes, with weapons that seemed to grow from their hulls. They opened fire on the crystal cities below. Energy beams lanced down from space, striking the Zephyrian shields. The barriers held for a moment, then began to flicker. The aliens had never designed them to withstand military weapons. Chris Davis led his Marines through the streets, trying to organize the fleeing civilians. The Zephyrians moved like frightened animals, bumping into each other and crying out in fear. They had no idea how to respond to danger. "This way," Chris shouted, pointing toward a solid crystal building. Everyone inside. A group of Zephyrian children stood frozen in the middle of the street, too scared to move. Their parents reached for them but seemed afraid to grab them and run. Chris realized they had probably never touched their children roughly, not even to save their lives. He didn't have time to be gentle. Chris scooped up 2 of the children and ran toward the building. The other Marines followed his example, carrying Zephyrians who couldn't make themselves move. Above them, the human fleet engaged the Korth ships. The Valkyrie's main guns fired streams of projectiles that tore through the organic holes. The aliens' weapons seemed designed for destroying defenseless targets, not fighting other warships. Kate watched the battle from the council chamber's observation deck. The Zephyrians around her stared in amazement as human weapons destroyed their enemies in minutes. "How did you do that?" Velith asked. "Our shields could not even slow them down." "Kinetic weapons," Kate explained. "Simple physics. Fast-moving metal hits target. Target breaks. We've been using variations of the same principle for thousands of years." Dr. Price was scanning the wreckage of the Korth ships with his equipment. "Colonel, these things are definitely organic. Some kind of bioship technology. But they're not very smart individually. I think they rely on numbers and overwhelming force." "Which means more are coming," Kate said grimly. She looked at the Zep around her. They were grateful for the rescue, but she could see they didn't really understand what had happened. To them, the humans had used some kind of magic to make the bad things go away. "Velith," she said, "we need to talk. Your people are going to die unless they learn to defend themselves. And that means learning to fight." "But we cannot fight," Velith protested. "It is not our nature. We are peaceful beings." Kate pointed at the wreckage falling from the sky. "Those things aren't peaceful, and they're coming back with friends. You can learn to fight, or you can learn to die. Those are your only choices." The chamber fell silent. For the first time in their history, the Zephyrians faced a truth their species had never had to learn. Sometimes peace was a luxury that had to be paid for with violence. Dr. Price stepped forward gently. "There might be a way to teach them. It won't be easy, and it will change their society forever. But it's possible." "How long do we have?" Velith asked quietly. Kate looked at the tactical display showing the positions of the Korth fleets. 2 weeks, maybe 3 before the main force arrives. We're going to have to turn your people into soldiers in less time than it takes to properly train a human recruit. And if we fail," Kate's expression was hard as steel, "then we'll die fighting beside you. But we won't let those things eat your children without a fight." Outside, Sergeant Davis was helping the last of the civilians into the shelter. One young Zephyrian, barely an adult, stayed behind. "Why do you fight for us?" the alien asked. "We have never been kind to your people." Chris checked his weapon and looked up at the stars, where more enemies would soon appear. "Because someone has to. And because that's what humans do. We fight the monsters, so others don't have to." The young Zephyrian stared at him with new understanding. For the first time in his life, he began to comprehend what it meant to be a warrior. The training camp was built in 3 days. Human engineering crews worked around the clock to create something that had never existed on Serenity Prime, a place designed for learning violence. They cleared a large area outside the capital city and filled it with obstacle courses, firing ranges, and combat simulators. Colonel Kate Sullivan stood at the entrance, watching the first group of Zephyrian volunteers arrive. There were about 200 of them, young adults who had volunteered to learn fighting. They walked slowly, their large eyes wide with fear and uncertainty. Captain Ryan Tucker waited beside her, with a clipboard full of training schedules. He had spent years teaching human recruits how to be soldiers, but he had never tried to teach pacifists how to kill. "Think this will work?" he asked Kate quietly. "It has to," she replied, "because if it doesn't, we're all dead in 2 weeks." The first volunteer to approach was the young Zephyrian, who had spoken to Sergeant Davis during the attack. His name was Thurin, and he was the son of a council member. His hands shook as he stepped forward. "I want to learn," he said through the translator. "I want to protect my people." Kate nodded and handed him a training uniform. "Put this on. Report to Instructor Davis in 10 minutes. Dr. Emma Lewis worked in a laboratory nearby, trying to solve a different problem. The Zephyrians had advanced energy weapons, but they were designed for cutting crystal and shaping metal, not for hurting living things. She needed to modify them for combat. The power levels are too low," she muttered, adjusting the weapons, internal components, and the beam is too focused. "We need something that can do real damage." Her assistant, a Zephyrian scientist named Corveth, watched nervously as she worked. "Dr. Lewis, are you certain this is wise? These weapons could hurt someone." Emma looked at him with tired eyes. "Corveth, that's the point. In about 2 weeks, a lot of someones are going to try to eat your planet. We need weapons that can hurt them first." On the training field, Sergeant Chris Davis faced his first class of Zephyrian recruits. They stood in a loose group, looking confused and frightened. Some were crying softly. "Listen up," Chris shouted. "I know this is scary. I know it goes against everything you've been taught. But your planet is under attack, and scared civilians die. Trained soldiers live." He held up a training rifle, a simple weapon that fired harmless energy pulses. "This is your new best friend. It will keep you and your families alive. But first, you have to learn to use it." He demonstrated the proper stance for holding the weapon. The Zephyrians tried to copy him, but their long, thin arms shook with the effort. Several dropped their rifles and backed away. "I cannot do this," said one young female. "The very touch of it makes me sick." Chris had expected this. Dr. Price had warned him that the aliens would have physical reactions to weapons. Their peaceful nature was built into their biology. "I understand," he said gently. "But think about your children. Think about your parents. The Korth are coming to eat them. Are you going to let that happen because holding a gun makes you uncomfortable?" The female picked up her rifle again, tears streaming down her face. Around the field, other Zephyrians forced themselves to hold weapons, despite their instinctive revulsion. The first week was a disaster. Half the volunteers quit after the first day. Those who remained could barely function. They moved too slowly, hesitated too long, and many became physically ill when trying to aim at targets. Captain Tucker tried different approaches. He had the Zephyrians practice protecting cardboard cutouts of their children. He showed them videos of what the Korth had done to other colonies. Nothing seemed to work. "They're not getting it," he told Kate during a late-night planning session. "Their instincts are too strong. When they see something that looks like combat, their minds just shut down." Kate rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of failure. "What about the weapons? Any progress there?" Dr. Lewis joined them, looking exhausted. "I've managed to boost the power output by 300%. The modified energy rifles should be able to damage Korth but they're still useless if nobody can fire them." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Lieutenant Ben Carter, Admiral Carter's son, was working with a small group of volunteers when he noticed something. One Zephyrian, an older male, named Nelvith, could fire his weapon accurately, but only when he was looking at images of Korth attacking children. "Tell me what you're thinking when you shoot," Ben said. "I think about my daughter," Nelvith replied. "She is only 6 years old. When I see those monsters hurting little ones, I feel ... angry. The weapon does not seem so wrong when I am angry. Ben had an idea. That evening, he gathered all the remaining volunteers and changed the training completely. Forget about being soldiers, he told them. You're not warriors, you're protectors. Every trigger you pull, every shot you fire, you're protecting someone you love. He set up new targets, holographic displays that showed Korth attacking Zephyrian families. When the trainees fired, they weren't attacking, they were defending. The change was immediate. Theron, who had struggled for days to hit anything, suddenly put 5 shots in a row through a Korth hologram's center mass. I can see my sister, he said, amazed. When I aim, I think about keeping her safe, and my hand stops shaking. Word of the breakthrough spread through the camp. Zephyrians who had quit came back to try again. Those who had stayed began improving rapidly. They still moved slowly by human standards, but they could function. The second week brought new challenges. The volunteers had learned to shoot, but they still couldn't work together. Zephyrian culture had no concept of military discipline or chain of command. Major Sam Foster took over squad tactics training. He tried to teach the aliens how to move as a unit, how to coordinate their fire, how to follow orders without question. It was like trying to teach fish to fly. They keep stopping to discuss everything, he complained to Kate. I tell them to advance, and they want to debate whether it's the best strategy. The solution came from the Zephyrians themselves. Elder Morveth, the ancient council member who had first suggested asking humans for help, volunteered to join the training. She was too old to fight, but she understood something the younger aliens didn't. In our society, we follow the wisdom of our elders, she explained to the human instructors. If you teach our leaders first, the others will follow. Kate immediately pulled the council members' children from regular training and put them in an accelerated leadership program. Firen and a dozen other young Zephyrians learned not just how to fight, but how to command others in battle. When they returned to their squads, the change was remarkable. The Zephyrian recruits still questioned orders, but they questioned their own leaders in their own language. Settling disputes quickly before following commands, Dr. Lewis completed the weapons modifications just as the first combat exercise began. The new energy rifles hummed with power, their beams capable of cutting through the same biomaterial that made up Korth ships. The exercise was simple: defend a mock village from simulated Korth attackers. Human Marines would play the enemy, using non-lethal weapons and wearing protective gear. The results were mixed. The Zephyrians could shoot now, and they could follow orders. But when the Korth charged at them, making terrifying sounds and moving aggressively, half the defenders froze in terror. Firen's squad held together, firing coordinated volleys that would have stopped real enemies. But other groups broke and ran, their training forgotten in the face of simulated violence. Not good enough, Kate said grimly. In a real battle, those broken squads would be dead. Give them more time, Captain Tucker argued. They're learning faster than any human recruit ever could. Their technology is better than ours, if we can just get them to hold the line. Kate shook her head. Time's up. Long-range sensors show the main Korth fleet entering the outer system. They'll be here in 72 hours. That night, Theron sat with his squad in their barracks, cleaning their weapons. The routine had become familiar, almost comforting, but he could see the fear in his people's eyes. Are we ready? Asked one of his soldiers, a young female named Zara. Theron thought about the question. 2 weeks ago, he had never held a weapon. Now, he could feel an energy rifle blindfolded and hit targets at 300 meters. But was that enough? We are not human, he said finally. We will never be as fast or as fierce as they are. But we have something else. What? Zara asked. Thyron looked out the window at the crystal city glowing in the moonlight. We know what we're fighting for. Every building out there contains people we love. Every street holds memories of our childhood. The humans fight for us, but we fight for home." Across the camp, Sergeant Davis was having a similar conversation with his Marines. "Think they'll hold when the real shooting starts?" asked Corporal Pete Wilson. Chris thought about Thyron and the other Zephyrians he had trained. They were still awkward with weapons, still slow to react. But he had seen something in their eyes during the final exercises, a quiet determination that reminded him of his own first combat mission. "They'll hold," he said. "They might not fight like us, but they'll fight. And sometimes, that's enough." In the command center, Kate studied the tactical displays showing the approaching Korth fleet. 3,000 ships, carrying millions of creatures designed for destroying worlds. Against them stood 200 partially trained Zephorians and 12 human warships. "It's not enough," she whispered. But she was wrong. In the crystal cities below, something new was happening. Zephyrians who had never volunteered for military service were picking up the modified energy rifles and asking to be trained. Parents, who had hidden their children, were now teaching them to shoot. The peaceful planet was transforming itself into a fortress. The Deathworlders had brought more than weapons and tactics. They had brought the one thing the Zephyrians had never possessed, the knowledge that sometimes the only way to preserve peace was to fight for it. The Korth fleet filled the sky like a dark storm. 3,000 bioships moved through space, in perfect formation, their organic hulls pulsing with alien life. At the center of the swarm was the largest creature anyone had ever seen, a living vessel the size of a small moon. Admiral Lisa Carter stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Retribution, watching the enemy approach. She had brought every available human warship to Serenity Prime, but they were still outnumbered 200 to 1. "Ma'am," said Captain Greg Williams, the Retribution's commander, "we're receiving a transmission from the Korth command ship. Put it on screen." The display showed something that made several bridge officers step back in horror. The Korth commander was a massive insectoid creature with multiple eyes and razor-sharp mandibles. When it spoke, the sound was like breaking glass. "Soft flesh defenders," it hissed. "You protect prey things that will feed our young. Surrender now, and we will consume you quickly." Lisa's expression didn't change. "Tell it to go to hell." The Korth commander tilted its head, confused by the human phrase. "Hell? Is this a place of food?" "You'll find out soon enough," Lisa replied, then cut the transmission. She turned to her crew. "All ships, battle stations. Today, we show these bugs why you don't mess with Earth's children." On the planet below, the newly trained Zepharian defenders took their positions. Theron led his squad to the crystal spire that protected the main city's power core. If the Korth took it, the city's shields would fail. "Remember your training," he told his soldiers. "Stay calm, aim carefully, and protect each other." His squad consisted of 20 Zephyrians, all carrying the modified energy rifles Dr. Lewis had created. They had practiced this defense 100 times, but this would be their first real battle. Zara crouched behind a crystal barrier, checking her weapon for the 10th time. "Theron, what if we fail? What if we run away like in the exercises?" Theron looked at her with calm eyes. "Then we run toward the enemy instead of away from them. If we must die, we die protecting our home." The first wave of Korth ships broke through the outer defenses and streaked toward the planet. Human fighters engaged them in the atmosphere, filling the sky with explosions and burning debris. But many of the bioships made it through. Colonel Kate Sullivan coordinated the ground defense from a command bunker deep in the Crystal City. The tactical displays showed Korth landing ships touching down all over the planet. Each one released hundreds of the insectoid warriors they had seen in the recordings. "All units, this is command," she broadcast. "The enemy is landing in sectors 7, 12, and 15. Zephyrian squads, move to defensive positions. Remember, these things are fast, but they're not smart. Use your training." Sergeant Chris Davis led a mixed unit of humans and Zephyrians toward the main landing site. The Korth had chosen a crystal park in the heart of the city, turning the beautiful gardens into a beachhead for invasion. "Davis to command," he radioed. "I count about 300 hostiles at the primary site. They're spreading out fast. Copy. That Sergeant Zephyrian 1st Squad is moving to support you." That was Thyron's unit. Chris smiled grimly. The young alien had come a long way from the scared civilian who couldn't hold a rifle 2 weeks ago. The first contact came at the city's edge, where a Zephyrian patrol encountered a group of Korth scouts. The aliens were exactly as terrifying as the recordings had shown, 3 meters tall, covered in chitinous armor, with claws that could cut through metal. The Zephyrian patrol leader, an older male named Gorveth, felt his training take over as the creatures charged toward his position. Squad, defensive formation, fire at will. 20 energy beams lanced out, striking the Korth with deadly precision. The modified weapons punched through the creature's armor like it was paper. Within seconds, all 8 Korth were dead. Gorveth stared at the smoking remains, hardly believing what had happened. "Command, this is Patrol 7. Contact with enemy force. All hostiles eliminated. No friendly casualties." Kate's voice came back immediately. "Confirm that, Patrol 7. You eliminated 8 Korth, with no losses." "Confirmed, Command. The new weapons are very effective." A cheer went up in the command bunker. The first engagement was a complete victory for the defenders. But Kate knew it was just the beginning. The real test came when the Korth main force reached the city center. Thousands of the creatures poured through the crystal streets, moving like a living wave of destruction. They ate everything in their path, buildings, vehicles, even the decorative plants. Thyron's squad waited at their defensive position as the enemy approached. Through his rifle scope, he could see the creatures clearly for the first time. They were even more frightening, in person, than in the recordings. "Steady," he called to his soldiers. "Wait for them to enter the kill zone." The Korth moved with predatory grace, their multiple eyes scanning for threats. But they had evolved to hunt helpless prey, not trained soldiers. They walked straight into the Zephyrian ambush. "Fire," Thyron shouted. The crystal spire lit up with energy beams as 20 rifles fired in unison. The lead Korth fell immediately, their armor no match for the concentrated firepower. But more kept coming, climbing over the bodies of their dead. "Fall back to secondary positions," Thyron ordered, following the tactics Captain Tucker had drilled into them. "Maintain fire discipline." The squad moved with precision that would have made their human instructors proud. They leapfrogged from cover to cover, each group providing fire support for the others. The Korth, expecting easy prey, found themselves facing organized resistance. But the creatures were learning too. After losing dozens of warriors to the Zephyrian ambushes, they changed tactics. Instead of charging blindly forward, they began using their claws to tunnel through the crystal buildings, attacking from unexpected directions. "Contact rear," Zara shouted as Korth warriors burst through the wall behind their position. 3 of the creatures had flanked them while they were focused on the main attack. Thyron spun around, firing from the hip as his training kicked in. His first shot took the lead creature in the center of its torso, sending it tumbling backward. But the other 2 kept coming. One of them reached Zara before she could bring her rifle to bear. Its massive claws swept toward her head, moving too fast to dodge. Thyron dove forward, tackling the creature and driving it away from his squadmate. They rolled across the crystal floor, the Korth's claws seeking his throat, while Thyron fought to bring his sidearm into position. He could smell the creature's alien scent, feel its impossible strength as it tried to overpower him. The pistol fired 3 times at point-blank range. The Korth shuddered and went still. Thyron pushed the dead creature off himself and helped Zara to her feet. Around them, the rest of the squad had eliminated the remaining attackers. "Thank you," Zara said quietly. "You saved my life. We protect each other, Theron replied. That's what Sergeant Davis taught us. The battle raged for 6 hours. Human fighters and Zephyrian ground forces worked together to push back wave after wave of Korth attackers. The enemy's numbers seemed endless, but their tactics were predictable. Dr. Lewis made a crucial discovery during the fighting. While analyzing captured Korth biotechnology, she found that the creatures shared a collective neural network. Each individual was connected to the others through organic transmitters in their brains. If we can disrupt their network, she told Kate over the radio, we can turn their coordination against them, make them confused and disorganized. How do we do that? I need someone to plant a neural disruptor inside their command ship, but it's a one-way mission. The disruptor has to be activated manually from inside the ship. Kate felt a cold weight in her stomach. She was asking someone to die for the mission. Major Sam Foster volunteered immediately. I'll take a small team, he told Kate. Get us aboard that command ship, and we'll shut down their network. Sam, you know what this means. The ship will be crawling with Korth. Even if you plant the device, you won't make it out. Sam smiled grimly. Admiral Carter didn't send us here to come home safe. She sent us here to protect the innocent. That's what we're going to do. Foster's team consisted of 6 Marine volunteers and, surprisingly, 3 Zephyrians, including Theron. The young alien had insisted on joining the mission after learning what it would accomplish. This is not your fight, Foster told him. You don't have to come. Yes, I do, Theron replied. My people learned to fight from you. Now we must learn to sacrifice for others, the way you do. They approached the massive Korth command ship in a captured bio-vessel, using its organic signature to slip past the enemy defenses. The ship's interior was a nightmare of living corridors and pulsing walls that seemed to breathe. Neural disruptor planted, Dr. Lewis reported from the planet. When you activate it, every Korth within 1,000 kilometers will lose coordination. But you'll only have about 10 minutes before their network adapts. Foster's team fought their way through the ship's defenders, leaving a trail of dead Korth behind them. The creatures seemed confused by the presence of intruders in their most secure vessel. They reached the ship's neural center, a vast chamber filled with organic computers that coordinated the entire Korth fleet. Foster placed the disruptor device, while his team held the entrances. Device is armed, he reported, beginning activation sequence. Sam, Kate's voice came over the radio. I want you to know, you're the best Marine I've ever served with. Thanks, Colonel. Tell my family I died doing something that mattered. Foster activated the device. Instantly, every Korth in the system began thrashing in confusion as their neural network collapsed. Ships collided in space, ground forces wandered aimlessly, and the organized invasion became chaos. The Zephyrian defenders pressed their advantage, pushing the confused enemy back toward their landing sites. Without coordination, the individual Korth were dangerous but manageable. But the mission's cost was high. Foster's team was overwhelmed by Korth reinforcements before they could escape. They died fighting in the heart of the enemy ship, taking dozens of creatures with them. Theron was the last to fall, using his body to shield the neural disruptor from Korth claws. His final radio transmission was heard across the planet. For our children, for our future, for the peace we choose to defend. The Korth fleet, leaderless and confused, began to retreat. But they had learned something dangerous, that prey could become predators when properly motivated. As they fled toward the outer systems, they carried word of the transformation they had witnessed. The galaxy was about to discover that the peaceful Zephyrians were peaceful no longer, and behind their transformation stood the species everyone called Deathworlders, the humans who had taught them that sometimes the greatest act of creation was the willingness to destroy what threatened it. Standing over the battlefield, Kate watched the enemy ships disappear into hyperspace. The Zephyrians had won their first war, but at a terrible cost. The crystal cities were scarred, thousands were dead, and an entire civilization had been forced to abandon its deepest beliefs, but they had survived. And in surviving, they had become something new, a people who understood that peace was not the absence of conflict, but the presence of those willing to defend it. The fire of war had spread from the Deathworlders to their students, and the galaxy would never be the same. 6 months after the first Korth attack, Serenity Prime looked different. The crystal cities still sparkled in the sunlight, but now they were protected by defensive towers and weapon emplacements. The floating bridges carried both civilians and patrol units. The peaceful world had become a fortress. Commander Alex Rodriguez, now promoted to Admiral, walked through the halls of the new Joint Military Academy. Human instructors worked alongside veterans, teaching the next generation of defenders. The sight still amazed him. Former pacifists explaining combat tactics to recruits from a dozen different species. In one classroom, Zara taught a mixed group of students how to coordinate fire support. She had survived the battle for the crystal spire and become one of the Zephyrian military's first officers. Her students included humans, Zephyrians, and representatives from 3 other species that had requested military training. "Remember," she told her class, "we do not fight because we love violence. We fight because we love what violence threatens to destroy." Down the hall, Sergeant Chris Davis led a practical exercise in urban combat. His students moved through a mock city, learning to clear buildings and protect civilians. Half of them were aliens who had never seen warfare before arriving at the academy. "Stay low, watch your corners, and trust your partner," Chris called out. "The enemy doesn't care what planet you're from. Dead is dead in any language." The changes went deeper than military training. In the Zephyrian Council chambers, High Arbiter Velith met with representatives from the galactic community. The peaceful species that had once ignored his pleas for help now hung on his every word. "The Korth have been spotted in the Rigel system," reported Ambassador Teleth of the Crystal Alliance. "Our colonies there have no defenses. We formally request military assistance from the Zephyrian Defense Force." Velith nodded calmly. The title still felt strange. Defense Force. 6 months ago, his people hadn't even had a word for army. Now, they were being asked to save others. "We will send the Third Fleet immediately," he replied. "Admiral Korveth will coordinate with your planetary defenses." After the meeting, Velith stood alone in his office, looking out at the training grounds where young Zephyrians learned to be soldiers. The sight both proud and sad. His people had gained the strength to protect themselves, but they had lost something precious in the process. Dr. Emma Lewis entered the office, carrying a data pad. She had become the Zephyrian military's chief technology officer, working to adapt their peaceful innovations for warfare. "The new shield generators are ready for deployment," she reported. "They can withstand Korth bioweapons and most conventional attacks. We're sharing the technology with any species that requests it." "At what cost?" Velith asked quietly. Emma understood his meaning. "The same cost as everything else we've learned. Knowledge that can't be forgotten." In space above the planet, the combined human Zephyrian fleet prepared for another mission. The ship designs reflected their partnership. Human weapons and armor integrated with Zephyrian shields and faster-than-light drives. The result was more powerful than either species could create alone. Captain Greg Williams stood on the bridge of the rebuilt Retribution, now fitted with crystal energy systems that doubled its firepower. His crew included both humans and Zephyrians working side by side. "Jump coordinates locked in," reported Lieutenant Zelvith, a young Zephyrian who had learned navigation from human instructors. "Ready to depart for the Rigel system. Take us out," Greg ordered. Around them, 50 other ships prepared to follow. It was the largest rescue mission in galactic history, and it was being led by a species that had learned warfare from the ground up. The Korth had returned to Rigel with a massive fleet, expecting easy prey. Instead, They found the Crystal Alliance, colonies protected by Zephyrian shields and defended by mixed squadrons of fighters. The battle was brief and decisive. The Korth had evolved to overwhelm helpless victims. When faced with organized resistance, backed by advanced technology, they crumbled quickly. Within hours, the surviving bioships were fleeing toward the galactic rim, but word of the victory spread across known space. The peaceful species of the galaxy began to understand that the old rules had changed. Pacifism was no longer enough to guarantee survival. On Earth, Admiral Lisa Carter read the battle reports with satisfaction. The human fleet had taken minimal casualties while saving millions of alien lives. More importantly, the Zephyrians had led the mission themselves. "They don't need us anymore," said Colonel Ryan Tucker, now her chief of staff. "That was always the plan," Lisa replied. "We didn't come here to create dependent allies. We came to teach them to stand on their own feet." But she was wrong about one thing. The Zephyrians did still need humans, just not in the way anyone expected. In the months that followed, other species began requesting military advisors. The Antaran Federation, which had refused to help against the first Korth attack, now begged for training programs. The Crystalline Confederacy offered trade agreements in exchange for defensive technology. The humans found themselves in an unexpected role, teachers of survival to a galaxy that had forgotten how to fight. Each species required different approaches. Some, like the aquatic Delphinians, needed to learn underwater combat. Others, like the gaseous Ethereals, required entirely new concepts of warfare. But the template remained the same. Take peaceful beings and teach them that violence, while terrible, was sometimes necessary to protect what they loved. The greatest test came when the Korth mounted their final offensive. Instead of scattered raids, they gathered every remaining bioship into one massive fleet. 300,000 vessels moved toward the core worlds of the galaxy, intent on consuming everything in their path. The response was unprecedented. 50 species that had never cooperated before united under a single command structure. The Galactic Defense Alliance was born from the ashes of the old peaceful order. High Arbiter Valeth found himself elected as the Alliance's first supreme commander. The irony wasn't lost on him, a former pacifist leading the largest military force in galactic history. The final battle took place in the void between star systems. 1,000,000 ships from 100 worlds faced the Korth swarm in a confrontation that would determine the fate of all sentient life. Admiral Rodriguez commanded the human contingent from his flagship, the Endeavor. Around him, the combined fleet moved in perfect coordination, humans and Zephyrians, Crystal Alliance, cruisers and Antaran destroyers, all working together. "All units, this is Supreme Commander Veleth." The transmission echoed across the fleet. 6 months ago, my people knew nothing of war. Today, we stand ready to end this threat forever. We fight not for conquest, but for the right of all beings to live in peace. The battle lasted 3 days. Wave after wave of Korth bioships crashed against the Alliance lines, only to be destroyed by coordinated fire from dozens of species. The enemy's numbers meant nothing against disciplined tactics and superior technology. On the second day, the Korth command structure collapsed entirely. Cut off from their hive mind by neural disruptors, the individual creatures became confused and disorganized. Many simply stopped fighting and drifted aimlessly through space. By the third day, it was over. The Korth fleet was destroyed. Their threat ended forever. The galaxy was safe, but at a cost that would be measured for generations. In the aftermath, the species of the galaxy faced a new reality. They had learned to fight, and they could never unlearn that knowledge. The age of universal peace was over, replaced by something more complex, the knowledge that peace must be defended. Veleth stood before the Galactic Council one last time, delivering a speech that would be remembered for centuries. 6 months ago, we pleaded for aid as helpless victims. he said. Today, we offer aid as defenders of the innocent. We have learned that strength is not the enemy of peace, it is peace's greatest protector. The Council voted unanimously to establish permanent defense forces throughout the galaxy. The humans, once scorned as primitive warmongers, became honored teachers and advisors. The Zephyrians transformed from helpless prey into the galaxy's primary protectors. But perhaps the greatest change was in understanding. The civilized species finally comprehended what the humans had always known, that the capacity for violence, properly directed, was not a sign of barbarism, but of responsibility. Admiral Carter's final report to Earth Command summarized the transformation. We came to save one species, and ended up teaching an entire galaxy. The aliens pleaded for aid, and we responded with fire. But it was not the fire of destruction, it was the fire that forges strength from weakness, courage from fear, and warriors from those who choose to protect rather than merely survive. On Serenity Prime, a memorial stood in the center of the Crystal City. It honored all those who had died in the transformation, humans like Major Foster, who had sacrificed everything for strangers, and Zephyrians like Thurin, who had learned that some things were worth dying for. The inscription, written in both human and Zephyrian script, read simply, "They taught us that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of those willing to defend it." Children of dozens of species came to read those words and understand their meaning. They learned that strength and gentleness were not opposites, that warriors could be peacekeepers, and that sometimes the greatest mercy was the willingness to fight for those who could not fight for themselves. The galaxy had learned the hardest lesson of all, that freedom was not free, peace was not passive, and survival required more than good intentions. It required the fire that the Deathworlders had brought from their violent world, transformed into a force for protection rather than destruction. And in learning that lesson, the galaxy became stronger, more united, and more capable of facing whatever threats might come from the dark spaces between the stars. The age of helpless pacifism was over. The age of defended peace had begun. The aliens had pleaded for aid, and the Deathworlders had responded with fire. But in the end, that fire had illuminated a truth that would guide the galaxy for generations to come. Sometimes, those who seem most violent are actually the greatest servants of peace, because they understand the price of freedom and are willing to pay it.